Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Online Minerals to Metals Forum hosted by the Southern African Institute for Mining and Metallurgy. My name is Aysha, and if you have any issues or would like to be added to the mailing list, please send me a private message in the chat. Just some quick Zoom etiquette. During the discussion, please type your question in the Q&A section, which you will find in the toolbox at the bottom of your screen. After the presentations, we will have a Q&A session where all of these questions will be answered. You may at that time raise your hand and speak directly to the panelists. Please note that this forum is recorded and will be made available to the public. You can remain anonymous by changing your name and leaving your questions in the Q&A. If you have any other issues, please do let me know. I would like to now thank our two panelists for joining us today, Carla Hudson and Jennifer Broadhurst. We will have Carla Hudson providing an overview of the Mine Waste Coordinating Body and how their various projects facilitate regional sustainable mine closure. Carla is the program manager for the Mine Water Coordinating Body, otherwise known as MWCB. She was responsible for facilitating the regional sustainable mine closure of the MWCB members of the Upper Olifants catchment area in Mpumalanga Coalfields. Carla has a master's in sustainable development and climate change from the University of London and an honors in geology from the University of Stellenbosch. She is a mine closure and environmental specialist with extensive experience in environmental impact assessments, permits around mine closure, and water management and stakeholder engagement. Alongside Carla, we have Jennifer Broadhurst, whom most of you should know quite well. She will provide an overview for the interdisciplinary Resilient Futures Community of Practice project at the UCT, which explores the opportunity for driving post-mining industrial development through fibrous multi-product value chains. Jennifer has 30 years of experience and development, 30 years research and development experience in the field of minerals beneficiation within various industry and academic organizations. Since joining the Department of Chemical Engineering at UCT in 2001, Professor Broadhurst has been involved in a number of research and capacity development activities relating to the environmental or otherwise sustainable issues of relevance to the coal-based power generation and primary metal production industry sectors. I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us, and I'm going to hand it over first to Carla to give her presentation.
Thank you very much, Aysha. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly. You can, you can start it from the beginning and have it full screen.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very excited to share this initiative with you. So basically, the Mine Water Coordinating Body, or the MWCB, was formed. The concept was formed in 2016 to look at the global sustainable development goals and to see how we can actually apply those SDGs to change a linear economy to a circular economy. I'm going to go really quickly, so we only got 10 minutes, so please ask questions afterwards. Then, so it was officially launched in June 2017 to encourage the collaboration between public and private stakeholders in the Upper Olifants catchment in Mpumalanga. Why was it decided on the Upper Olifants catchment? The Upper Olifants catchment is one of the most polluted catchments in South Africa. It also has a huge impact on the lower and middle Olifants catchments, as well as the Limpopo Basin. So it's a very important catchment to look at and to sort out the water problems, as it also has an impact on the Kruger National Park. So what we, as the Mine Water Coordinating Body, is looking at is to address the environmental, social and economic challenges that will arise from scaling down the mining operations as well as power station closure that has now become apparent. Then how can we do that? We can only do that if we look at regional mine water management. Why are we looking at regional mine water management? Because we cannot look at mine water just in silos or water management just in silos. We have to look at a regional approach, otherwise it will not be sustainable. And in that, we're looking at joint collaborative projects where we can actually apply the regional green circular economy principles to ensure that we have a just transition, which is now the new buzzword in that region. So, as I've mentioned, the biggest focus we have at the Mine Water Coordinating Body is collaboration. And that has been very, very successful. As you can see, we've got 5 funding members in phase 2. We've completed phase 1, and we just started phase 2 in March of this year. So we've got a really good balance between private funders and public members. And then we've got an array of different interested parties. So this is a very busy slide, but basically we identified the problem statement on what we would like to look at and solve. What we are offering is a facilitated collaborative platform where we are and have developed partnerships between private and public and key stakeholders. And this is currently going beyond mining. We're actually incorporating other companies as well to make sure that we find a comprehensive solution for the region and not just a mining solution. We would like the communities to be independent of mining after mine closure and power station closure. And we've identified 5 projects. I will discuss 2 of them today. And hopefully in phase 2, we will implement the 5 projects that we've identified as feasible. The big positive is that the stakeholders can actually share the costs, that each mine don't have to carry all the costs, that we can actually share and call it blended funding. And then we have the opportunity to strengthen the regional water management through the principle of fit for purpose. So what we're hoping to achieve is viable communities that is not dependent on mining, to make sure that the mining companies has actually got a social license to operate. As you all know, last year was not a good year regarding community engagement. There was quite a few protests. So hopefully that could be calmed down and better negotiated. Also, understanding the permitting process better and have a good relationship with the national governments so that these permitting processes can actually be speeded up. Then reduce the cost of mine closure and the liability that these mines are facing. Once again, a very sturdy, comprehensive collaborative platform, and then we would like to have a regional land and water plan, and then a regional economic plan, and then sustainable projects that will go on after mine closure. So this is our overall objective, is to provide a collaborative platform where members can actively contribute to sustainable mine closure through the use of mine water, mine land and infrastructure, as well as power station water and land and infrastructure. So the mandates we had in phase 1 was to look at a regional water model, and we followed the ICMM catchment guide framework to achieve this. We did achieve that. That's the Upper Olifants. On the left-hand side, you can see the water quality, so we could very quickly identify which management units needed urgent attention. And then on the right side, you can see the quantities of water that will be available until 2035. So you can't start a project that is reliant on water if you don't have enough water to keep you going. So the regional economic model, this we developed in partnership with Mpumalanga province. And these 5 areas was identified through a workshop that was facilitated by the International Council for Mining and Metals. And these projects were seen to be the focus areas in agriculture, energy, waste, tourism, and ICT. But as you remember from the previous slide, this is a circular economy. So none of these will stand alone, and the one will actually feed off the other one. So the regional sustainable closure model, we took the water model, we took the regional economic model, and we identified 5 management units. And how we selected this was that there was available excess mine water, or fit for purpose water. There was more than one of members present in the area. It was viable. What do we say viable? That the community would buy into this, and it was actually possible, that there was enough land, there was suitable land, and there was suitable infrastructure. And the big one was that the improvement of the water quality in that unit will actually have a big impact on the improvement of the water quality for the rest of the Olifants catchment. So there's the 5 identified units, and we will be looking at 2. So 3 of the projects we will have the principal, and this is thank you very much to Anglo American that's developed this model. So this is the circular model, circular economy model in pictures. And then obviously we can't do everything starting at the same time. So we're focusing on plastic pyrolysis, tire pyrolysis, solar PV, farming, and then we will grow. As we're laying the foundations, we will grow into this full circular economy. So we're currently busy looking at the suitability of the available water and water quantity to the soils, and to actually see if there will be a happy marriage between the available soils and the available water quality. And we use a system, decision support system, that was developed by the WRC, the DWS, the Department of Water Affairs, and then University of Pretoria. This is quite a unique system. Worldwide, we are the first that actually has developed a system like that. So we're actually doing it in regional scale. It's also the first time that we've actually looked at a regional scale solution on the system. And hopefully soon we will have a very good picture of what would be possible where, so that we can actually go back to the communities and tell them what is the reality and what is possible. So the one project that has been very successful, and that's been going for the next 5 years, and hopefully would be going, being expanded into a bigger project. It's currently being done on 32 hectares. And the farmer that we've actually partnered with, the team from Beestepan Boerdery, is very, very keen, because as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, they have been one of the few farmers that was actually profitable. And their crops did really, really well. Once again, collaboration was key to this project, and it's been very successful, and hopefully we will be able to expand this project. And then the other project that we're looking at from a regional management unit water program is in the Broadhurst management unit. And it will center around the Broadhurst Pollution Control Works. Once again, huge collaboration. We're looking at the Broadhurst Pollution Control Works, which unfortunately has not been working successfully due to various logistical problems from 2007, and a community that's actually living downstream from there, and ultimately Mpumalanga is feeling the effects of very low pH water. There's also 2 wastewater treatment works in the area, which is unfortunately not working very well. So the Department of Water Affairs has asked us to look at how we can actually look at technology and how we can actually work this together and bring up a whole solution for that area. So that's my very quick story, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Carla. I know that we had a presentation from on the green engine at one of our last workshops within the Resilient Futures Cup. So I'm actually quite excited to hear a bit more on that, maybe in the Q&A section. But for now, let's hand over to Jenny. Jennifer, can you hear us? Oh, there you go.
I'm on my way. Just trying to work out with all the different buttons. Okay. All right. Okay. Have I got it in slide screen mode there, everybody?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So, good afternoon, everybody. And wow, that was fascinating, Carla. It's really good to see how the Mine Water Coordinating Body initiative has grown, from the first times that I attended those presentations. Incredible. So, as indicated by Aysha, I'm going to be providing a brief overview of the Resilient Futures Community of Practice initiative at the University of Cape Town, which focuses on post-mining industrial development through fibrous multi-product value chains. And just to provide some context to this initiative, as I'm sure many of you are well aware, there are already a number of abandoned mines within South Africa, with more mine closures expected going forward, particularly in the Broadhurst Gold Basin, and as Carla has already indicated, in the Mpumalanga Coalfields, as we sort of head into this transition into renewable energy. And even when planned, these mine closures are frequently associated with long-term environmental degradation and often leave an economic vacuum, especially if the mines have been the main and sometimes the only generator of economic activity and provider of essential services in the area. And this is particularly problematic in South Africa, where mines tend to occur in close proximity to human settlements and often even catalyze the development of these settlements. So the premise for this initiative is that the use of mine land for agricultural purposes offers the potential to restore degraded land and stimulate economic growth beyond the life of mine. And with fiber producing plants such as bamboo, hemp, kenaf, sisal, and flax being of particular interest due to their potential to create multi-product value chains and also to potentially selectively absorb metals from soils. So more specifically, this initiative set out to explore whether fiber-rich plants such as bamboo and bast fibers can be used to remediate degraded land in a way that is economically feasible, leads to enhanced economic complexity, promotes the establishment of a fiber micro-industry, creates higher value add product outputs, and provides employment opportunities beyond the life of mine. So the study was initiated in October 2017 with funding from the National Research Foundation under the auspices of the Community of Practice initiative. And it initially brought together 4 South African research chairs located at UCT. So Haroon Borat holds the South African Research Chair, also known as SARCHI, in Developmental Economics, and he was the PI for this project and led the Development Policy Research Unit team. And his co-chairs included Henry Mostert, who holds the SARCHI in Mineral Law in Africa and led the Mineral Law in Africa team, Sue Harrison, who held the SARCHI in Bioprocess Engineering and led the Center for Bioprocess Engineering and Future Water teams. And the 4th founding chairholder was the late Dee Bradshaw, who held the SARCHI in Minerals Beneficiation. And I subsequently stepped in for Dee and led the Minerals to Metals team. And this interdisciplinary team allowed us to approach the study from different perspectives.
Jenny?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We're getting a bit of sound feedback. It's
okay. I wonder where that's coming from. Let me see if
I take. It's like reverberating. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
I wonder if it's my sound system. It sounded fine earlier when we tested the sound system, didn't it?
I think so. I can't. It's maybe a little too subtle for my ears, but it does. I think.
Is it still reverberating?
According to one of our participants, some microphones are just quite small, and it helps to hold it close to your mouth.
Okay, I'm going to try and do that. Is that better? Can you hear that?
It's still reverberating.
Maybe if I take my microphone off completely. I'm going to try and do that and just speak to the computer. Hello?
Yeah, there's no reverberation. You might just want to speak a little bit louder.
All right, I'll do that. Okay, so I've taken my earphones out, so let's see if that works better. Oh, I must get a new sound system, I think. Sorry, everybody. So this interdisciplinary team allowed us to approach the study from different perspectives. So the environmental perspective focused on the environmental factors that influence the ability of rapidly growing fiber-rich plants to remediate degraded and polluted land. The engineering perspective focused on the processing alternatives and associated implication for downstream recovery of multi-value products. The economics perspective focused on economic complexity through the development of socio-economic linkages, and the legal perspective focused on the regulatory barriers and how they can be addressed. And in case any of you are wondering, we have subsequently expanded our team in the pilot phase of the initiative to also include the social perspective, and I will speak to that in a subsequent slide. So the first phase of the NRF-funded project, which was run from October 2017 to October 2019, essentially set out to identify opportunities as well as the constraints and gaps in developing a post-mining fibrous economy. And this was achieved through analysis of the published literature, interviews with relative experts, and through preliminary economic complexity modeling. And research findings over the 2-year period were communicated through 4 multi-stakeholder workshops, 2 were held in Cape Town and 2 in Johannesburg, as well as in published technical reports and policy briefs. And we have posted all the relevant documentation and information on our website, and that can be found at www.resilientfutures.uct.ac.za. And just to summarize some of the key findings from this first phase, our team found that from a macroeconomic and market perspective, South Africa is well positioned to diversify its fibrous economy, with 2 potentially viable options having been identified, namely a low complexity approach using bamboo as a wood replacement in the manufacture of products such as flooring and wood composites, and a high complexity approach using bast fiber plants to generate non-woven textiles and biocomposite panels for motor vehicles as the primary targeted product, together with a number of optional byproducts from the non-fibrous part of the plant. And whilst a number of challenges have been identified in initiating these industries, such as the continuity of supply and high input costs, lack of an enabling framework, our initial study has indicated that it would be possible to overcome these challenges with an effective and well-targeted micro-industrial policy and enabling regulations. Furthermore, fibrous plants, particularly hemp, appear to have phytoremediation potential in that they can extract metals from soils. However, previous studies have been limited, and there are still a number of unknowns and uncertainties, such as the effect of soil and water contaminant levels on plant growth and on the quality of fiber, and the potential to integrate soil phytoremediation and recovery of both metal and fiber values still requires further investigation. And these investigations will form part of phase 2 of the NRF project, which additional funding has recently been awarded. This phase will run roughly from October 2020 to October 2022, and will entail a more detailed feasibility study and analysis of the opportunities identified in phase 1. So running in parallel to phase 2 of the NRF-funded project is a pilot case study in the Broadhurst Goldfields, which is currently being conducted in collaboration with Anglo Gold Ashanti, but will soon be taken over by Harmony. I'm sure you've all seen the news this week about that. And for this project, which essentially takes the form of a living laboratory study, we have also joined forces with researchers from the Center for Sustainability in Mining and Industry at the University of the Witwatersrand. And as in the case of the NRF-funded project, this pilot project will use an integrated multi-perspective approach with activities covering a number of key areas or research thrusts. So from the environmental perspective, the thrust on the cultivation of fiber-rich and hyper-accumulator plants will seek to answer questions relating to the degree to which the remediation of degraded land from mining activities can be restored through active plant cultivation, as well as aspects such as the tolerance of plant cultivars to contaminants in soil, irrigated water and local weather conditions, and the effect of soil nutrients and modifiers on plant growth and biomass. Also relating to the environmental perspective is considerations of the integrated management of mine water and waste. And from an economic perspective, the project will explore the potential for a fiber-based industry to provide employment and enhance skills development, as well as local and export market opportunities for fiber-based products, the enabling policy interventions and partnership arrangements, and opportunities for social enterprises and or SMEs. And the project will also explore opportunities for co-funding various activities of the pilot case study and for identifying financial arrangements and potential investors for full-scale operations. And from a technical perspective, the project will investigate and develop processing options for the conversion of biomass into fiber-based products, and also see if we can simultaneously recover metal values. And from the legal perspective, the project will identify regulatory requirements for implementation of proposed interventions and establishment of multi-stakeholder partnership agreements. And last but not least, the social perspective will focus on stakeholder consultation, participation and engagement, which you've seen from Carla's presentation is so important, as well as your local skills development and training. And these quite sort of aspirational objectives and large tasks will extend over 2 to 3 project phases over a period of anywhere between 5 and 10 years. But in the meantime, our first phase will run for an 18-month period until February 2022, and this is to allow for a full crop growing cycle. So this phase will essentially take the form of a scoping and preliminary feasibility study with a focus on testing the viability of various fibrous plants to both tolerate local conditions and remediate contaminated soils, and to compile background information on the site, local climate and socioeconomic conditions, the skills levels in the area, as well as potential product markets in the site locality. And on this basis, to eventually scope out the detailed work plan for subsequent phases. So this pretty much brings me to the end of this presentation. I believe that some of my fellow researchers from some of the other research groupings have joined us on the panel for the question and answer session. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing and hand back to Aysha, and I hope my sound came right. I'll have to have a look at that longer term. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Yeah, no, the last bit was perfect. So I see that we've got quite a silent participant list. Although we've got a lot of people here, there's only been one question. So I do think that people should come forward and challenge the presentations. I would, let's go into the first one. I think it's more a general comment. David is interested in bioaccumulation of toxic metals and how disposal of vegetable matter is achieved. So maybe more on the technical side, how does this actually happen? Who can I throw this question at? Who would be comfortable in answering?
I can start off, and I can also then throw this out to Shilpa to talk a little bit about, because we are looking at this quite holistically. So on the bioaccumulation of metals, our preliminary studies seem to indicate that your accumulation of metals occurs mainly in the roots and the shoots, the non-fibrous part of the plants. So this indicates that there would be potential to actually separate the fibrous from the non-fibrous plant at the harvesting stage, and potentially be able for us to then selectively recover the metal without impacting so much on the quality of your fiber. Using really ashing, just by ashing the roots and the shoots and the leaves where the metals are supposed to be accumulated. But this is really just based on previous work, and it's something that we will be exploring. In terms of some of the waste biomass that we might get, we're looking at using a really sort of comprehensive flow sheet where we will look at processing every single part of the plant. So Shilpa, I don't know if you want to come on, because you've been looking at this whole sort of waste refinery type of approach.
Yes, thanks, Jenny. I'm just checking whether, can you hear me?
Very nicely, thank you.
Okay, so yes, so as Jenny was like saying, so this whole thing is we're essentially trying to investigate how to make our process as circular as possible. So in a sense, there will be a debate where we'll have on whether we want to get the metals out through phytomining or something, or whether we should be concentrated on the fiber. And at the start, it does seem like we can concentrate the metals in other parts than the fiber, so that will be quite nice. But when the fiber and the metals are jointly together, then we'll have to figure it out. And then, yes, we are hoping to take a biorefinery approach to try and make sure that we don't have any major waste, and then we try to be as resource efficient as possible.
Thank you, Shilpa. We're getting a stream of Q&As now, so that's good. We have a question for Carla. What are some of the biggest challenges that need to be addressed to implement treatment of mine water and community-based reuse in the Upper Olifants catchment area?
Hi, thank you for your question. The biggest challenges at the moment is to make sure that the community actually buys into the concept of fit for purpose, and then to make sure that this water is actually available. Because the biggest challenges we've actually seen at the project that we're doing at the moment is you know, the communication between the farmer and the mine, and actually getting the water onto site. So that is some of the logistics that we need to sort out and to make it more smoothly.
I have a few questions for you, Carla, so if you wouldn't mind. We have a question. You mentioned plastic and tire paralysis. I think I'm maybe not saying that.
Paralysis, yeah.
Paralysis. I'm like, nope, that's something else. Will the ultimate product be gas or oil?
So we've investigated the tire paralysis. Obviously, there's quite a few emerging participate in that. So we're actually looking at other uses for it. So one of the uses that was quite interesting for me was tiles, roof tiles. And then obviously with tires, there's quite a bit of steel involved, so you can recycle the steel. And then I believe it's black char that comes out of it that you can actually make roads with and sidewalks. And so we're still looking at other options. Then, yeah, diesel is definitely an option, and definitely biodiesel from the plastic. But we're also doing investigations in what is the offtake interest. So that is not, we haven't finally decided one or the other.
We have another question for you from Andrew. He thinks that you potentially mentioned 5 studies and you've provided details for 2 case studies. What are the other projects that are being considered?
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for your question. Yes, so the 2 projects that I mentioned is actually further down the line. The other 3 is the projects that we're actually now going to analyze with the DSS system to actually see where we place what. So if there's no possibility, then we will place the solar PVs. And so those 3 projects, it's basically going to be the green engine projects. So placing what where. And hopefully that will be done by the end of October. Then we can actually exactly say what the project is. So it's very much in the scoping pre-feasibility stage at the moment, the other 3.
And then I think this is for you as well from Vera. What will be the process of encouraging industry to adopt the risk-based site-specific irrigation guidelines? Are they required as part of mining permits?
No, that system is purely if you want to irrigate and see what your mine water, if you don't treat your mine water. So it's for fit for purpose water. So most of the mines are actually treating their water to potable at the moment.
Okay, and then we have one from Dr. When I have access to mine dumps and want to reprocess, how does one get into collaborative projects? I suppose that's for Carla as well.
Well, I think you should bring, if it's in Mpumalanga, I think you must come and present to the steering committee, because all the representation is there and it can be discussed, and we can take it further from there. Okay,
great. I'll put my email out there so that we can put you in contact with one another. I have some questions from Christina for Jenny. Firstly, she says, many thanks for a very interesting presentation from you both. Her first question is, are you considering other crops for energy production? If yes, did you have any issues in planting energy crops for energy production and not for consumption? And then the third part of that question is, at UKZN, we are experimenting with fibrous material for alternative building materials, including green concrete. Are you also considering that kind of application?
Okay, so I can have a bash, but I might bring in Francois as well. On the energy production, we actually were looking at a project with, funnily enough, the European Union for energy crops. And there we were looking at alternatives. We were particularly interested in exploring some of our more sort of fleshy algar type plants. So we were quite keen to try that. I'm going to pass it on to Francois just now, because the economist sort of said that this whole, there were issues with the economy, the economics of going for biofuels, for instance, because of, or using these crops for alternative fuel production, and it's had to do with economy of scales. In terms of looking at green concrete, a very interesting sort of byproduct from, for instance, hemp in particular, is hempcrete, and that it's from your non-fibrous part of your plant. I think that that's a really interesting product for us. So we are very keen in considering that application, yes. it's in our flow sheets, and it would be interesting to actually make contact with you on the work that you've been doing at KZN. So Francois, do you just want to elaborate on this whole aspect of energy as a product from bamboo, for instance?
Hi, Jenny. Can you hear me?
Yes,
hello?
we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Okay, so so what we did is we spoke to a few people in industry, specifically related to bioethanol and biofuel, and said, okay, well, if you take one of these fibrous crops, can you what's the potential to go down the line and generate biofuel from this? And they related to us a number of constraints. I'm trying to just touch on a few of these. One of the issues is really just economies of scale, is that you need to produce a mass amount of the crop if you're going to make enough biodiesel or of the bioethanol that can be used to create your biodiesel that goes in, into your commercial vehicles or what or the like. So it's really a matter of, does that industry shift towards this mass production, and how do you get that going? What bioethanol is produced is normally, from what I understand, is a lot of your sugar producers. They're doing it as a side, offshoots of production, and very specialized, and they're exporting the bioethanol, as opposed to, they can't basically bring it into your basic commercial use in motor vehicles because of this sort of dissociation with your refineries and whatnot. So basically the whole industry has to kind of move towards that, and there's a lot of factors that don't allow for that to happen. So economies of scale and just kind of getting everyone working together, or getting all the parts of your value chain working together, that's a big constraint at the moment. The other factor was just the cost involved. So if you're producing in such a mass, these plants, you got to have your refineries or distilleries really close to your site. So transport cost was a major issue because you've got a low bulk density product. It just costs too much to transport it to refineries in your sort of major cities. And this, I mean, if you think that the production of the crop would be primarily in sort of mining areas which are further from your cities. So those were two. There's a number of others, and those are in our report. So we have a specific section speaking to bioethanol and just some of the constraints that are brought across to us by industry players and what they thought. So we just kind of unpacked those issues. So I don't want to go too much into that, apart from the economies of scale being a major issue. And then we did speak to someone that works quite closely, or works in the hemp industry, which is quite small, obviously, but they've basically designed a number of different products using hemp. So they're just experimenting, what can we do with hemp? And one of these products was hempcrete, which they, being passionate about their product, believe in it. But at the moment, it's just the scale is so small that it costs a huge amount to make it. But they believe down the line that it could be used for low cost housing. But again, it's the sort of getting the scale. You got to produce they think that the production of the crop needs to be done locally, again, for the same reasons of transport. You can't import in sort of a low bulk density product is very expensive. So if you can produce it locally and then manufacture then use it for the manufacturing down the line for the hempcrete, that's a lot more effective. So it's interesting, but like a lot of things have to come right for it to sort of be viable, I think. But again, these are all emerging sort of industries, these sort of using fibrous plants as a input to a lot of these products. Yeah.
Thanks, Francois. I have some questions for Carla. One from Cledwin. When mines treat mine-impacted water to potable standards, why are they required to feed it back into the abstraction sources as opposed to directing it as feed to a water plant, treatment plant?
So that, thank you for the question. That is actually being looked at currently by the Department of Water Affairs. So we're waiting in anticipation for the new regulations. It was meant to come out in April. Then it was supposed to come out in July, and I'm hoping it will come out by the end of the year, because the whole way they are actually thinking about water use and release of water is changing. So we will have to wait and see what happens in the new regulations.
Thank you. We have a question from Dave, directed towards Jenny. Jennifer mentioned the need for a well-targeted micro-industrial policy to enable the development of the fiber economy, recognizing that effective industrial policy remains generally elusive. I was wondering what it is that the team has identified that is lacking in the existing policy and legislative framework that might constrain development in this instance.
Thanks, Dave. It's actually a really good question. I mean, I know you're from Australia, and certainly in South Africa, this whole development of new value chains is hugely challenging. I went to a really interesting workshop run by Nedbank on this, with really high flyers, lots of venture capitalists. And this one guy from in London wrapped up, and I absolutely agreed with him, knowing very little about all this, and said, you know, we're missing the 3 C's: collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. But I'm going to actually field that question straight through to Francois, our developmental economist, to actually maybe give you a bit more of a sort of academic answer to that question.
Okay, so thanks for the question. So we haven't, in our work, necessarily critiqued the current form of industrial policy in South Africa. That's in the form of the Industrial Policy Action Plan. Aside from it being quite, dare I say, all-encompassing, it basically targets a very large number of sectors. That's the only sort of, but basically we haven't critiqued it in any real way. But what we do have in our work that we have done is we take an approach of looking at capabilities and constraints, and sort of adopting sort of a product level micro approach to it. So we don't say we need to expand skills across the board. We want to say, well, what skills are specific to, sorry about that. So we're trying to look at it the product level approach. So that's how, in this complexity approach or method modeling that we use, we identify specific products, and then we go and we ask industry experts and firms what sort of factors would enable the production of those products or constrain them, and then it's very specific to the product. So example, if we had to look at, I'm trying to give an example, that one of the things is sort of stone wool or rock wool, and one of the issues that came, and this is not specific to the fibrous products, another project that we did, but it's quite a interesting case, is one of the factors that constrained that industry is just the regulatory framework. So firms in South Africa that were producing this product could not get the relevant licenses and permits from the standards authority. And if they got those permits, they would be able to provide to the local parastatals. But because they couldn't get the standard, well, the permits and the standards for the products that they're making, that was not in, they weren't enabled to actually supply the industry. They were able to export to local countries within Southern Africa, but they weren't able to provide within the local market. And that's sort of a standards of the regulatory issue that's constraining that product. So it's just an example of product specific industrial policy, as opposed to maybe looking more broadly and covering a whole array of a broad industry level. So clothing and textiles, but rather we focus on specific products and have this sort of micro industrial approach. That's sort of the best way I can answer that, though I know it's not specifically to what you are asking.
Thank you so much, Francois, for that. I know we've been kind of throwing you and Shilpa into the deep end, but I really appreciate your ability to swim quite well. So I have some questions for Carla, one from Tapiwa. She's interested to know what are the major socio-economic factors, for example, job creation, being incorporated into the DSS to determine the viability of other projects or case studies.
Yes, the main focus of these projects is to ensure that these communities are independent, economically independent from mines. So that implies that their jobs that is currently only reliant on the mine and the supply chain to the mine, that there's a whole new economy that's not reliant on that. So yes, a huge focus on job creation, on training, on skills development. Yeah, so in all the projects that we're looking at, but what the water, the land and the infrastructure from the mines and the power stations will be the enablers to make sure that these projects are viable. So basically for anything that we're looking at, you would need land, water and infrastructure. So we've got that, and so now that's why we're developing these projects. So yes, it's the whole principle of a just transition to make sure that when we transition to renewable energies, that there is a strong alternative economy already established.
Thanks, Carla. I think we're waiting for one question from Celestine. If they're struggling for whatever reason, just raise your hand and we can have you speak directly to the panel. Otherwise, there's another question for Jenny from Cledwin. In plant selection and propagation, how will the seasonal as well as spatial variations in plant behavior impact feasibility? Will it be a blended plant type approach that will be taken?
Okay, so what we've done, we've already sort of identified different climate variations in different parts of the country. So obviously we've got, you know, the Broadhurst Range, you've got the gold, and then we've got up in Mpumalanga quite a different climate around coal. And so we tend to have these sort of regional hubs. If you think, we go down in the Northern Cape, obviously completely different again. So what we've done is we've identified plants, and I really think I have to show Shilpa into this again, because it was her group that really did this work, and we matched them up to the different climates, and even had a look at soils. But we've done that at almost a desktop type of study, but really at the proof's in the pudding. So this is one of our projects now in the Broadhurst Range, although we're doing a climate mapping there to see how the climate varies. We've mapped the plants to that sort of climate as best as we can, and then we're testing different soil types. So really ranging from less contaminated to more highly contaminated in that area. So Shilpa, I don't know if you want to elaborate on my answer there.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. So yeah, I mean, indeed, the COP phase 1 was mostly a desktop study, and we relied heavily on literature in trying to narrow down the fibrous plant that we may use on those degraded land. And we came up with 5 potential plants. Like we have bamboo, we have 3 boss fiber, hemp, flax, ganaf, and then potentially sisal. And those are all different plants. I mean, the boss fibers are quite similar, but so the reason why we didn't commit to only one plant is because we strongly feel we need to do like proper pilot scale studies and actually getting the soil from a degraded land and then trying to do some experiment around it. So, but I mean, definitely we need to actually do those experiments and then figure out, okay, on paper we think it may work, but what are the challenges there? And then hopefully we'll be able to just like make the system more resilient.